Graduation day at MIT should have been the proudest moment of my life, but instead of joy, I got a text from my dad. After today, don't expect help from us. Time to grow up. No congratulations, no hug, just rejection. I stared at the message, my hands trembling while the crowd roared around me. I thought I had lost everything. Then my phone rang again. It was my CFO, Lauren. The IPO launched. He paused. We're live to $6.3 billion valuation. You're a billionaire. My parents cut me off seconds before the world crowned me tech royalty. They thought I was nothing. I was everything. The cheers around me were deafening. MIT's graduation ceremony had filled the entire stadium with joy, laughter, and the proud cries of thousands of families. Grads tossed their caps in the air, hugged their parents, and posed for photos with tearful smiles. But I sat still, my hands clenched in my lap, my red gown too heavy for my shoulders, my heart even heavier. Everyone around me had someone. Their parents had flown in from across the country, some from across the world. I had no one. My name had been called minutes ago, my diploma handed over with applause, from strangers, not family. I scanned the crowd out of habit, hoping to catch a glimpse of my parents. I knew they were there somewhere. I had left them tickets. They just hadn't come to find me. My phone buzzed. A single notification, one text from Dad. I held my breath and tapped the screen, hoping stupidly Denise that it might say something kind, that he was proud, that he saw me, that for once in my life he felt what the other parents here felt. Instead, the message read, "After today, don't expect help from us anymore. You're 38. Time to face the real world. No congratulations. No, we're proud. Just a final dismissal, a full stop." For a moment, I forgot to breathe. It wasn't just the words, it was everything behind them. Years of quiet judgment, the dinner table arguments, the condescending sighs every time I talked about research, algorithms, or artificial intelligence. The way my dad always said, "You should have been a nurse, a real job, a respectable one." And my mother's favorite line, "You're not building a future, you're delaying real life." I had heard it all over and over. Women need stability. Dad once told me, not theories, not code, a husband, a home, that's real success. And here I was, degree in hand, PhD after nearly a decade of grueling work, sleepless nights, rejected papers, research breakthroughs, a company built from scratch in between classes and dissertations. None of it mattered to them. They thought I was wasting time hiding from life. They never saw the life I was building. Brick by digital brick, system by system, until it stood tall enough to change everything. Around me, classmates were crying into their mothers' shoulders, taking smiling photos with proud fathers, and holding bouquets from siblings and grandparents. Laughter floated in the air like bubbles, as if the entire world had gathered to celebrate the next generation of thinkers and leaders. And me, I had a 6-word message that cut deeper than any silence. I wanted to stand up and scream, not out of anger, but pain. To ask why I was never enough, to ask why my love for knowledge, for progress, for possibility, had made me less of a daughter. But I stayed quiet because it wasn't new. I'd been alone before, at the science fairs where they never showed up, at the tech exposé where my name was buried in the program, at the funding pitches where I sat in rooms full of men who doubted me, and still won, still today hurt in a way nothing else had. This was supposed to be the moment I shared with them, a closing of one chapter, a celebration of everything I'd worked toward, but they hadn't come for that. They came to tell me it was over, that their version of parenting ended the moment I stood on this stage. So, I sat in a stadium filled with joy and felt like I was drowning. Then, somewhere nearby, I heard someone say, "You okay?" I turned. It was Jessica, a friend from the AI lab, seated just a row ahead. Her eyes scanned my face, noticing something was wrong. I nodded stiffly, shoving my phone back into my pocket, but the tremble in my hands said otherwise. I finally pulled out my phone again. 3 missed calls from Mum, no voicemails, no texts, just the red missed call icon staring back at me. I waited, expecting something, anything kind to follow. An apology, an explanation, a scrap of affection, even if thinly veiled. Another vibration, one new message. Mum, your father is right. You need to grow up. We've supported you long enough. No, I love you. No, we're proud. Just a cool mechanical echo of Dad's verdict. It was as if they'd rehearsed it together, as if the moment I finished my PhD was the moment they'd chosen to remind me that to them I'd always be a child trying to play adult. I clenched the phone so tightly I thought I might crack the screen. All around me my classmates were laughing, hugging, celebrating, but my mind sank backward, drowning in memories, like that Christmas dinner 2 years ago when I tried to explain the machine learning algorithm I'd just published in Nature AI. I'd only gotten 2 sentences in before Dad interrupted with, "Len, not everyone here speaks nerd. Can't you just relax for one night?" And Mum, sipping her wine with a polite smile, had chimed in, "Sweetheart, people don't want to hear about computers during the holidays. Maybe try talking about something everyone can relate to, like finding a nice guy or decorating your apartment." I'd laughed it off back then, pretended it didn't sting, but it had. Then there was the phone call sophomore year when I told them I wanted to pursue grad school instead of taking the software engineering job at Amazon. They acted like I was throwing away my future. Dad had said, "You're scared of the real world. That's why you hide behind books." Mum followed with, "One day you'll regret not building a family when you had the chance." They didn't see a visionary. They saw a runaway, and no matter what I achieved, it was never enough to shift their perception. I was always the too determined, too independent daughter who'd never quite fit the mold they built for me. A voice crackled through the stadium speakers, announcing the final set of graduates. Around me, people stood, applauding the last names called. My hands stayed in my lap, the text from my mother still burning into my skin like a brand. Suddenly, the phone vibrated again. Caller-eyed Elliot Choi, CFO, Spectrum Nexus. My heart jumped. Elliot never called unless it was important. He knew I was at graduation. He also knew that today wasn't just about my PhD. It was also the day we'd circled in red on every investor presentation, every planning deck, every roadmap, the day our company went public. I hesitated for half a second, then answered in a whisper, "Elliot, I'm at graduation." "I know," he said, voice tight with urgency. "I'm sorry to bother you, but Lauren, it's happening." My pulse quickened. "The IPO, yes," he said, then paused like he needed to steady himself. "We launched at 28, but within 15 minutes we jumped to $47. Right now we're at $52 and still rising." I blinked. "What? We're looking at a $6.3 billion valuation, Lauren. Spectrum Nexus is exploding." My breath caught, my stomach flipped. "We're already the biggest tech IPO this quarter," Elliot continued. "CNBC just called. Bloomberg wants to feature you. It's insane." I couldn't speak, couldn't process, couldn't believe that while my parents were writing me off as a failure, the world was writing headlines about my success. I owned 71% of Spectrum Nexus. That meant Elliot's voice broke through my silence. "You're a billionaire, Lauren. You did it." Around me, the crowd had quieted as the ceremony wound down, but in my ears, a different world had opened. A world where my life's work wasn't just valid singing, it was revolutionary, and no one in my family had the slightest clue. The words echoed in my ears long after Elliot hung up. "You're a billionaire, Lauren." I stared blankly at the stage where the final speaker was wrapping up with a generic send-off about chasing dreams and changing the world. Meanwhile, I had just leapt into an entirely new universe, one where my net worth had exploded past anything I could have imagined even a few months ago. I did the math again in my head. Spectrum Nexus, 6.3 billion valuation. My stake 71% that put me over $4.5 billion. I wasn't just successful, I was now one of the richest women in tech. And no one around me knew. It felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. A few minutes ago, I was drowning in rejection, my father's words ringing in my head like a gavel. Time to grow up. And now I was wealthier than the board members who used to look past me in investor meetings, richer than the men who'd once told me, "You're too emotional for leadership." The air around me changed. Jessica, still nearby, had noticed something in my face. She leaned closer again. "Lauren, what's going on? You look like you just saw a ghost." I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. So I passed her my phone, the last message from Elliot still open. Her eyes scanned the screen, widened, then darted up to meet mine. "Is this real?" I nodded once, numb. She covered her mouth with one hand. Oh my God, I could feel it. The shift, not just inside me, but around me. A few other students had caught Jessica's reaction. One leaned over to peek at her phone. Another turned to whisper to her friend. Phones came out, heads turned. It was starting. I felt like I was sitting on a firecracker right before it went off. I wasn't dressed like a billionaire, no high heels, no designer handbag, no entourage. Just a crimson gown, slightly wrinkled from the humidity, and a head full of thoughts too heavy for my cap to hold. But inside me, something seismic had shifted. The trappings of wealth didn't matter. What mattered was what the world would know soon. That I had built something from nothing. While everyone, even my own family, thought I was wasting time, the pride I couldn't share with my parents began to rise in my chest. I'd done this. Not just the IPO, the research, the product, the patents, the team I'd recruited and mentored. Every weekend skipped, every relationship sacrificed, every moment I chose work over comfort. I wanted to laugh or cry or both. Instead, I sat quietly as the applause swelled again, this time for the closing benediction. A breeze moved through the stadium, lifting the edges of my gown. My phone buzzed again. Texts now from people who had apparently seen the breaking news. Wall Street Journal, AI startup Spectrum, Nexus surges in historic IPO. TechCrunch, MIT grad becomes billionaire at commencement. Bloomberg, the future of facial recognition, has a new face. Jessica turned to me again, her voice a whisper. "Lauren, you're everywhere right now." I gave a weak laugh, more from disbelief than anything else. "Yeah," I murmured, "apparently I am." From behind me, I heard another voice. "Wait, is that her?" I didn't turn around, not yet. The moment hadn't fully landed, my hands still shook, my throat was dry, but deep down something had settled. A strange calm in the eye of the storm, because for the first time I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. Not the professors who doubted me, not the VCs who passed on me, not even my parents, and definitely not myself. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Elliot. It was Maria Santos, our head of public relations. Her name on the screen sent a jolt through me. Maria was efficient, never dramatic. She wouldn't call unless something big was happening. I hesitated, then answered quietly, shielding the phone with my graduation cap. "Maria Lauren," she said, breathless. "I know it's graduation day and I hate interrupting, but we're blowing up." "I know," I replied. "Elliot called me. No, I mean media-wise. You're the #1 trending topic on Twitter. Every major outlet has picked it up. CNBC, WSJ, Forbes, even Vogue wants a quote." And she paused, her voice trembling with excitement. "We just got word from the Pentagon. The contract is official. $400 million signed this morning." I closed my eyes. $400 million. Also, Maria continued, Microsoft finalized their licensing agreement. $200 million. They're integrating our AI into their Azure cloud, and we've got pending deals with Amazon and Apple. It was surreal. Just this morning, I was wondering if my parents would say, "I'm proud of you." Now the US government and the biggest tech companies in the world were saying it for them with dollar signs and global partnerships. "Maria," I began, but she cut in. "There's more. We're scheduling media interviews for the next 48 hours. You've already been called the most influential woman in tech this year. MIT wants to feature you in their alumni campaign. And Lauren, she added, lowering her voice, we have donation requests pouring in from scholarship funds, STEM nonprofits, women in tech organizations, and the university. Donation requests, I echoed. Yes, people already see you as a philanthropist. They think you've pledged a massive gift to MIT. You haven't yet. I laughed softly, the absurdity of the moment wrapping around me like static. Then Maria's tone shifted. Also, the university just emailed. They want to name the new computer science building after you if you're willing to commit $100 million. The numbers blurred in my head. The ideas spun like satellites around a sun I hadn't even realized I'd become. I had built this, all of it, and I was still sitting in a folding chair in a red robe while my classmates took selfies with their grandparents. Maria, I said gently, thank you. We'll regroup tomorrow. Absolutely. I'll prep everything. And Lauren, you did it. Really? Congratulations. As I hung up, I saw them, my parents descending the concrete steps of the stadium, looking around with tight expressions like they were scanning for something or someone to scold. They still didn't know. I could see my father's familiar frown, the one he wore when he was about to lecture me on financial responsibility. Mum clutched her purse the same way she always did when nervous, her lips pursed, her brow tight. They hadn't come to celebrate, they had come to finalize their judgment, to deliver a final lesson. They didn't know they were walking straight into a maelstrom. A dozen rows still separated us, but they were getting closer. I froze for a moment, tempted to slip away, to vanish into the crowd before they reached me, let them live in ignorance a little longer. But something inside me shifted. I was done hiding. I was done shrinking to make others feel comfortable. I was done pretending their approval was the peak of my mountain when I had already scaled far higher peaks without them. So I stayed seated, my back straight, my phone on my lap, still buzzing with texts and media alerts, and I waited for them to see me. All of me. For the first time, I wanted them to. The stadium noise felt muffled like I was underwater. My parents were now only a few rows away. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the weight of everything unsaid between us. I had no script for this moment, just a lifetime of silence ready to shatter. Then, just as they reached the row behind mine, my phone buzzed again. It was Maria. I picked up, whispering, I can't talk now, they're here. I know, she said, and that's exactly why you need to hear this. Before I could protest, she continued, Lauren, I'm putting you on speaker. Just listen. I held the phone near my lap as Maria's voice rang out clearly, unmistakably loud enough for those nearby, especially the two people who had just stepped into earshot. Lauren Taylor is the most talked about woman in tech today. She began reading headlines. The IPO of Spectrum Nexus is not just historic, it's a generational moment. You're being called the next Ada Lovelace. Some outlets are comparing you to Steve Jobs. I glanced around, heads turned. The people in front of me, behind me, beside me, all were suddenly paying attention. My parents froze. Breaking just now, Maria continued. An official email from the White House. The president is requesting Lauren Taylor's appointment to the National Advisory Council on Artificial Intelligence and National Competitiveness. A few audible gasps. Someone behind me whispered, Did you just say the White House? My mother blinked slowly, confusion written across her face. My father's mouth tightened into a line, like he was still trying to make sense of it. Maria pressed on. The council will advise on ethical AI deployment, defense applications, and international policy. Lauren, your algorithms have not only revolutionized private sector tech, they're being studied by government think tanks as foundational to the next phase of American security infrastructure. My mother finally spoke barely above a whisper. What is she talking about? I looked up at her. She's talking about me, Mom. My father stepped closer. Wait, the White House, Lauren, what is this? It's my work, Dad, I said quietly. The work you both thought was just theory, a phase, a distraction. Maria wasn't finished. Additionally, her voice boomed on. MIT has officially extended a full professorship offer to Lauren Taylor, along with an endowed research chair, citing her as one of the top minds in applied AI. Jessica, still seated nearby, turned to me with wide eyes. "Lauren, what the hell?" More whispers, more phones lifted discreetly. I could feel the entire section shifting its energy. The woman sitting quietly, ignored by her parents minutes ago, was suddenly the sun around which the room began to orbit. Maria's final note. Also, Bloomberg's business cover next month. It's you. Photo shoot request pending. I ended the call. Silence stretched between me and my parents, the kind of silence that screamed. Dad looked pale. He opened his mouth once, then closed it. Mum clutched her purse tighter than ever. "We didn't know," she finally said. "Lauren, why didn't you tell us?" I inhaled slowly. "Because every time I tried, you shut me down, dismissed it, called it childish, called it running away. You told me to grow up, to stop pretending, to find something real." Dad tried to respond, but nothing came. The girl they had come to cut loose had become something too big to ignore. And now they were standing in the wreckage of their assumptions, trying to rebuild understanding from rubble. I didn't speak again, not yet. I wanted the silence to do its job, to echo. I didn't put the phone away. Instead, I hit speaker again and scrolled through the news alerts this time so my parents could hear it all for themselves. If they didn't believe me, maybe they'd believe CNBC, Bloomberg, and the Pentagon. A robotic voice read headlines aloud. Spectrum Nexus IPO surpasses all expectations. MIT PhD becomes billionaire during commencement. Pentagon confirms $400 million AI contract. Each line punched the air between us. My mother's brows furrowed, mouth slightly ajar. My father remained stone-faced, arms crossed, but stiff. Not in his usual stern posture, more like someone bracing for a fall. "This is real," I said softly but firmly. "This is what I've been building while you were asking me to get serious. This is what I was doing." "You never said any of this," Mama murmured. "Because you never listened," I replied. "You never asked." Around us, the buzz had grown, the size. People seated nearby were watching, whispering, elbowing each other with hushed exclamations. I caught pieces. "She's the one, the AI company. No way, that's her." Jessica was frozen beside me, her eyes flicking from me to my parents. No one dared break the moment. Then came the final twist, the one that broke through even the most hardened doubt. The stadium lights dimmed slightly, and the massive LED screen that had been looping faculty names and honorary degrees shifted to a new slide. A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. "Congratulations to Dr. Lauren Taylor, Spectrum Nexus historic IPO, youngest self-made female billionaire in tech." My photo appeared, one I had taken weeks ago for investor materials. Smiling confident, standing in front of the company's headquarters, I heard my mother's breath hitch. She gripped her purse with trembling hands, the leather groaning under pressure. My father's arms slowly dropped to his sides. He said nothing, just stared at the screen like it had pulled the floor out from under him. No words from me could have done this. But now it wasn't my voice speaking, it was the world's. "This is a mistake," Dad said at last, his voice. "Right." I shook my head. "No, it's not. That's me. That's my company, and that's your daughter." Mum reached for the phone in my lap, her fingers shaky. She scrolled, her eyes darting over the screen as if looking for proof it was all some elaborate prank. But it wasn't. Every link, every alert, every photo confirmed it. "It says here, Nee," she whispered it. "You founded the company 5 years ago." "Second year of grad school," I replied. "You never told us. You never asked." The LED screen remained lit for another minute before fading back to standard ceremony content. But the image had seared itself into the minds of everyone in that section of the stadium, including my parents. I could see it in their faces, recognition colliding with regret. Everything they thought they knew about me was unraveling right before their eyes. Dad finally sank onto the steps, resting his elbows on his knees. His jaw flexed as he processed. His voice was low, nearly inaudible. 4.5 billion, probably close to 5 by market close, I said. He laughed once, a short, breathless sound. Not mockery, not denial, just disbelief. My mother sat beside him, still scrolling through articles. Her lips moved, reading silently. Her hands had stopped trembling, but her shoulders shook slightly, like someone who was realizing they had misunderstood something so completely they didn't even know where to start fixing it. I stayed quiet. This wasn't revenge, it was revelation. And they finally saw me, not the daughter they tried to mold, but the woman I had become in spite of it. For a long while, none of us spoke. The ceremony continued in the background, but it felt like it belonged to another world entirely, a world of tradition, order, and expected outcomes. Ours was the corner where expectations had just combusted. I finally broke the silence. Why? My voice was low but steady. Why didn't you ever believe in me? Mum blinked at me, lips parting as if to answer. But I didn't wait. You never asked what I was working on. You never read a single paper I published. You called my work a hobby, a distraction. Dad shifted on the concrete step, rubbing his palms together slowly. All you ever wanted, I continued, was for me to follow a version of life that made you comfortable. A husband, kids, a house. That's all you saw for me. Lauren, Mum said gently, we just wanted you to be happy. No, I replied, you wanted me to be normal. They both looked away, stung by the honesty. I didn't want to hurt them, but I wasn't going to protect them from the truth anymore either. Remember that New Year's dinner? I asked, when Uncle Greg asked what I was researching, and I started to explain our early emotion mapping algorithm. Dad winced. You cut me off and said, Luren, no one here wants to hear about robots and feelings. We're trying to eat ham, not build a spaceship. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, to save face. I paused. And when I turned 35 and you bought me a spa weekend and a dating service subscription because you were worried I was still single, Mum, you said, at some point, a woman has to stop chasing dreams and start building a life. That broke me. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I blinked them back. This wasn't a moment for tears. This was about truth. It was about reclaiming all the parts of myself I had shrunk to make space for their approval. Jessica, who had remained respectfully silent during the confrontation, suddenly spoke. Wait, hold on, she said, brows drawn in disbelief. Loren, you're the CEO of Spectrum Nexus. I turned to her, stunned. You didn't know? She shook her head slowly. No, I mean I knew you worked in AI, but I thought you were on the research team. You never mentioned being the founder or owning the company. I didn't want anyone to treat me differently, I admitted, especially not at SE school. Jessica blinked. Girl, you sat through 20 hours of ethics committee meetings with me and never once brought it up. You let me complain about my student loan debt while you were building a billion-dollar company. That made me laugh, the first real laugh in hours. It cracked through the tension like lightning, and a few nearby grads chuckled too, even if they didn't know why. I didn't lie, I said. I just didn't correct people's assumptions. It was easier that way. Why? Jessica asked. I turned to my parents. Because I didn't think anyone would be proud of me. Not really. You both spent so long dismissing everything I did. It started to feel like there was no point in explaining anymore. Dad exhaled deeply, rubbing his face with both hands. I didn't mean to, he started, then stopped himself. I just didn't understand it. Any of it, all the technical talk, the AI, the papers, it scared me. I thought you were disappearing into something cold and unreachable. I thought, maybe if I pulled you back, you'd be safer, Mum added softly. And I was worried you'd end up alone, that you were sacrificing love and stability for machines. I nodded slowly. I get it. You were scared, but you didn't ask. You assumed, and every assumption chipped away at the bridge between us. They looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Maybe shame, maybe regret. I never stopped loving you, I said. Even when you didn't see me, even when you made me feel like my success wasn't real because it didn't fit your version of a daughter. Dad looked up, eyes shining. You're not just successful, Lauren. You're a force. And I was too proud, too small to see it. And in that moment, I saw something shift in him. For the first time in years, he looked at me not as a daughter to control, but as a woman to respect. My mother started to cry, not a loud theatrical sob, but something quieter, more fragile. Her shoulders trembled. She pulled a tissue from her purse and dabbed at her eyes, trying to hide it as if tears might weaken her position. Dad said nothing. His eyes stayed on the grass in front of him, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. He looked like he was holding back 1,000 apologies, none of which had quite found the courage to break free. I watched them for a moment, letting the silence settle, letting them feel the weight of it. Then, without a word, I pulled out my phone again. I opened my banking app, turned the screen towards them, and tapped on a folder labeled Family. They leaned in, confused. "This," I said, voice low, "is everything I've sent your way over the last 5 years." Mum blinked. "What do you mean?" I scrolled slowly. "That $3,200 Visa gift card you received 2 winters ago, the one you used to repair your car's transmission." I paused. That was me. Her lips parted in shock. The anonymous donation that paid for Emma's first semester at Brown. That was my scholarship fund. I knew she'd never accept it if she knew where it came from. Dad looked up sharply. The bowling league equipment replaced with a grant from the Neighborhood Wellness Initiative. I nodded. That was me too. I created the fund under a shell name. They stared at the screen like it was some kind of magic mirror, showing them a reflection they'd never thought to look for. "You've been helping us," Mum asked, voice cracking. "I've been watching," I replied gently, "and helping quietly. Because even if you didn't support my choices, I still wanted to support you." Dad's eyes narrowed. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I didn't want you to feel ashamed or obligated or guilty. I let that sit for a second, and honestly," I continued, "because I didn't think you'd see it as love. I thought you'd see it as showing off or rubbing my success in your face, and I didn't want that." Mum was crying openly now. Her makeup had smudged slightly under her eyes, but she didn't seem to care. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "All this time," she whispered, "we thought you were lost, but you were saving us." I nodded once. I wasn't trying to make a point. I was just trying to be there in the only way I could. Jessica was now openly crying too, though she did her best to pretend she had something in her eye. A few classmates nearby had stopped pretending they weren't eavesdropping. One guy actually whispered that this is better than any movie. Dad finally spoke, his voice low, hoarse. "I thought I was protecting you by pushing you to a more traditional path. I didn't realize I was the one who needed to change." I looked at both of them, at the people who had raised me, loved me in their own complicated way, and failed me in ways they hadn't understood until today. "I never needed you to be proud of me," I said softly. "I just needed you to listen, to ask, to try." Dad leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "I didn't know how to listen," he said. "I thought I had to lead, to push, but you were already leading, and I was too afraid to follow. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a cinematic apology wrapped in a bow, but it was real, and it was enough." I pocketed the phone and reached out to hold my mother's hand. She squeezed it so tightly I thought she might never let go. The moment of fragile understanding between us was shattered by a new presence, one more polished, more urgent. "Dr. Taylor," I turned. A woman in a sleek navy blazer approached, flanked by a camera crew and a sound guy lugging a boom mic. She flashed her badge. "Jennifer Walsh, CNBC. We were hoping to catch you before the ceremony ends. Your IPO is everywhere. Would you be willing to answer a few quick questions for our live segment?" Before I could respond, I felt my mother's hand tighten around mine. "They'll be watching," she whispered. "Everyone." I took a slow breath and nodded to the reporter. Just a few minutes. The camera was already rolling. Jennifer stepped into frame, smile practiced and glowing. We're here live at MIT's graduation, and joining us is Dr. Lauren Taylor, AI pioneer, CEO of Spectrum Nexus, and now officially one of the youngest self-made billionaires in tech. Lauren, congratulations. How does it feel? I turned towards the camera, voice even. Surreal, a little overwhelming. The market response has been extraordinary. $6.3 billion valuation and rising. But what's making headlines just as much as the IPO is that it happened today at your graduation. She smiled again, but it was laced with curiosity. What does this day mean for you beyond the numbers? I looked briefly at my parents before answering. It's the end of one journey and the beginning of another, I said. This degree wasn't just a title, it was the foundation of everything we've built. Spectrum Nexus started with research that no one believed would scale. Today proved it could. Jennifer leaned in slightly. And your family? Are they here with you today? The camera panned slightly to reveal my parents sitting just behind me. Mum straightened. Dad shifted, visibly uneasy. They are, I said. Jennifer waited, sensing a story. I took a breath. My parents have always supported my education, even when they didn't fully understand my field, I said carefully. They encouraged me to think critically, to ask big questions. And while our paths haven't always aligned, their values gave me the discipline to keep going. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. Her eyes shimmered with fresh tears. It wasn't a lie, it wasn't the whole truth either, but it was enough to protect them. While honoring the complexity of our relationship, Jennifer continued, We've just received a breaking update. The president of MIT has confirmed that the university is in talks to name its new computer science building after you in honor of your contributions to the field and a proposed $100 million donation. Can you comment on that? My parents froze. My mother gasped audibly. Even my father's mouth parted slightly. I gave a faint smile. It's early in the conversation, but I'm committed to giving back. If my story can inspire more women and underrepresented voices to pursue AI and STEM fields, then every sleepless night has been worth it. Beautifully said, Jennifer replied. One final question. What's next for you? I paused, considering balance, I said simply, between growth and ethics, between innovation and humanity. Technology moves fast. I want to make sure we don't lose our way while chasing the future. She nodded. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. We'll be watching. The crew stepped away as quickly as they had arrived, murmuring about editing timelines and satellite feeds. I turned back to my parents. Mum was crying again, silently this time, wiping tears with the tissue she hadn't let go of since earlier. Dad looked stunned, but no longer defensive, just humbled. They want to name a building after you? She asked, almost like a child asking if magic were real. I smiled gently. That's the plan. I don't understand how you got here, Dad said slowly, but I know I almost missed it. No, I said, you didn't. You're here now, that matters. Dad shifted forward on the bleacher bench, elbows on his knees, gaze fixed on the ground, as if trying to find the words hiding in the cracks between the concrete. I was wrong. It was so quiet I almost thought I'd imagined it. Then he looked up, eyes meeting mine with a weight I hadn't seen since I was a little girl, asking questions he couldn't answer. I thought success looked a certain way, he said. A steady job, a mortgage, a family, things I could recognize, things I could control. He paused, exhaled. I didn't know how to make sense of your path, so I dismissed it. I thought pushing you toward my idea of stability was love, but really it was fear. Fear that I'd raise someone who didn't need me anymore. The stadium crowd still murmured in the background, distant applause rolling like waves. But for me, the world had narrowed to this single moment. I judged you, he continued, because I didn't understand you and I was too proud to admit it. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Lauren. Truly, I didn't move. Not because I didn't believe him at times, but because I wanted to remember every word. I had waited so long to hear them. I needed to be sure they were real. Then I spoke, quiet but clear, "Thank you." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the opening. Beside him, Mum reached for his hand and squeezed it, and that alone was its own kind of healing. But we weren't done. I stood slowly and stepped towards the small press crowd still lingering nearby. Several reporters had noticed my conversation with CNBC and were already inching closer, sensing something more. I cleared my throat. "Could I say something?" I asked, voice slightly raised. A few heads turned. A photographer raised his camera. Someone from Bloomberg started recording. "I'd like to make an announcement," I said. The press leaned in. "I'm committing 10% of my Spectrum Nexus shares, currently valued at approximately $450 million, to create the Lauren Taylor STEM Opportunity Foundation." Gasps, flashes. The foundation will focus on full scholarships, mentorship, and infrastructure for young women and girls from underserved communities who want to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. I paused. For every girl who's ever been told she's too emotional for tech, too dreamy for science, too ambitious for her own good, this is for you. A moment passed, and then the applause started. From students nearby, from professors, from strangers, it spread like fire. Jessica clapped the loudest, tears in her eyes. One of the reporters shouted, "Why now?" I answered simply, "Because money is just energy, and energy should move. I don't want to just make headlines. I want to make change." Another voice, "What are people calling this?" I smiled. "You can call it whatever you want, but I hope they call it a beginning." Later that afternoon, I'd learned the headlines. Billionaire with a heart. Lauren Taylor donates $450 million to women in STEM. Tech tycoon or tech guardian. Meet the woman building the future for others. America's most generous young billionaire. But right now, all I saw was my dad rising to his feet. He stepped forward, hesitant at first, then closed the distance between us. He held out his hand. I looked at it, startled, then reached for it. His grip was warm, rough, trembling just slightly. He hadn't held my hand like that since my 20th birthday, when he gave me the keys to my first beat-up car and told me to stay safe out there. He squeezed once. "You're my daughter," he said, "and I see you now." I blinked hard, my throat thick with emotion. "I never stopped being her," I replied. "You just stopped looking." But there was no bitterness in my voice, only truth and love and relief. The cameras clicked, the moment was caught, immortalized, but the real story wasn't the money or the fame or even the forgiveness. It was the hand that finally reached back. The university's security team finally stepped in, gently escorting us away from the growing press swarm. They guided us through a side gate, down a corridor and into a private reception room tucked behind the stadium. A long table sat in the center with untouched pastries and cold coffee. But we ignored all of it. We needed space, not snacks. We needed privacy to piece together something that had shattered long before today. The door closed behind us. The noise of the outside world, cheers, camera shutters, celebratory chaos, faded like a distant storm. It was just the three of us now. Dad sat first, Mum followed. I remained standing, trying to steal the hum of adrenaline in my limbs. For a while, no one spoke. Then finally, Mum broke the silence. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were still red. "Lauren, we owe you more than congratulations." I didn't move, she continued. "We owe you an apology for not believing in you, for not asking the right questions, for assuming your silence meant failure instead of focus." Dad cleared his throat. "We didn't just miss your journey, we dismissed it. We made your success feel like rebellion when it was really resilience." I slowly walked to the opposite side of the table and sat down. "You weren't just wrong," I said gently. "You were loud about it." They both nodded. "I remember every moment you cut me off, every holiday where I wasn't allowed to talk about my work, Every conversation that ended with, "That's enough tech talk, Lauren. You didn't just ignore my dreams. You made me feel like they were inconvenient." Mum looked down at her hands. "I thought I was helping by grounding you, by keeping you from disappointment." "You were the disappointment," I said softly, "and I carried that weight into every meeting, every paper, every pitch." Dad leaned forward, elbows on the table. "We thought we were protecting you from failure, but you didn't need protection, you needed belief." That made me pause because, yes, I'd wanted that desperately. I'd wanted someone to say, "I don't understand this, but I believe in you anyway." Instead, I got silence and doubt. And still, I made it somehow. "You know," I said, eyes fixed on the untouched croissant in front of me, "there was a point where I almost gave it all up." Mum looked up sharply. "What?" I nodded. "Second year of my PhD, right around when the first algorithm prototype failed. My advisor questioned my entire direction. The lab funding dried up. I was eating frozen dinners and working 3 part-time jobs, and I still hadn't heard a single, 'Oh, I'm proud of you' from home." Dad looked stricken. "I was so alone," I admitted. I remember sitting on the steps outside the AI building, middle of the night, holding my laptop in one hand and a withdrawal form in the other. "Lauren," Mum whispered it. "I almost signed it," I continued it. But something stopped me. I thought if I quit now, then all their doubts were right. And if I stay, I at least get to prove them wrong, even if they never see it. That confession landed like a stone in the room. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. Mum wiped fresh tears. "I didn't want to be a billionaire," I said. "I wanted to be seen." "You are," Dad replied. "You always were. We just refused to look." That line almost undid me because it wasn't just regret. It was remorse. Genuine, heavy, the kind you don't fake. Mum reached across the table, palm up. I took it. Then Dad did the same. Our hands met in the center, fingers overlapping, trembling slightly. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a movie ending. It was a beginning, clumsy, late, imperfect. But it was real. We sat like that for a long time, hands together in the center of the table, breathing in sync, hearts beginning to unlearn years of silence. Then I stood and walked around the table. I didn't speak. I just wrapped my arms around both of them at once. It had been 10 years since we'd embraced. 10 years since I'd leaned into their warmth without resentment, clinging to the edges of my skin. And now here we were, 3 imperfect people hugging, not out of obligation, but out of need, out of healing. Mum whispered, "I'm sorry," into my shoulder over and over, like she was trying to stitch the words into the fabric of my gown. Dad didn't say anything, but his arms tightened. That was enough. When I pulled back, I saw something new in their faces. Not just remorse, but openness, willingness. So I took a breath and made the offer I had been holding in for months. "There's something I want to ask you both," I said. They looked at me puzzled. "I'm building a board of advisors for the Lauren Taylor STEM Opportunity Foundation. It's going to include educators, scientists, and former scholarship recipients. But I want it to also include people who've seen the world from outside the lab." Their eyes widened in unison. "I want you on it." Dad blinked. "Us? You both?" I nodded. "Not for show, for perspective. You know what it's like to raise a daughter who's different. You know how hard it is to understand a world you weren't trained to navigate. That makes your insight valuable." Mum was silent, stunned. "Then are you sure, completely? If I'm building this for girls like me, then I need to understand the fears and misunderstandings they'll face from family, from community. I need your voices in that room." They didn't respond with words. Instead, they each reached out and held my hand again. "I'd be honored," Dad said. "I'd be humbled," Mum added. We smiled at each other, all of us a little teary again, but this time for the right reasons. Then Mum hesitated. "There's something else we need to tell you," she said, glancing at Dad. He cleared his throat. "It's probably silly, but we've actually been following your work." I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" Mum pulled out her phone and opened the LinkedIn app. I've had a profile for a while. I never connected with you because, well, I didn't know if you'd want that, but I've been reading your updates, your publications, watching the progress, Dad added. Same here. I checked your company's press releases. I even printed one out last year and pinned it on the board at the bowling alley. That nearly undid me. All this time, I whispered, you knew. We didn't know everything, Dad admitted, but we knew enough to be proud. We were just too ashamed to say it after pushing you away. I felt something crack open in me, a long-held wound finally dissolving under the warmth of truth. You should have told me, I said, but there was no anger in it. We were waiting for the right moment, Mum replied. There's no such thing, I said. Only moments you make right.
And this was one of them. I stepped forward again and pulled them both back into my arms. This time tighter, firmer. No lingering walls between us. Forgiveness wasn't a single act. It was a process. But in that moment, I knew we were already halfway through it. And for the first time in my life, it didn't feel like I had to carry all of us. We were walking forward together. The sun had dipped low by the time I returned to my apartment. The same cramped second-floor unit I'd lived in since my second year of grad school. The place still smelled faintly of old textbooks and burnt coffee. The laminate countertop was chipped. The floor creaked in all the same places, and the Wi-Fi occasionally cut out when it rained. But it was mine. It had witnessed my breakthroughs and breakdowns, my sleepless nights writing code, and the mornings I cried quietly into cereal because nothing seemed to be working. This tiny space held more of my story than any luxury condo ever could. I dropped my keys into the ceramic dish by the door, the one I'd made at a campus art event 5 years ago. My diploma was still rolled up in a cardboard tube on the kitchen table. I hadn't even opened it yet. I sat down on the worn-out couch, kicked off my shoes, and exhaled. The world had changed, but I hadn't. Not really. I glanced at my phone. One new message, Dad. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Proud of you. Always have been. Just too damn stupid to say it. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't long, but it was everything I'd ever needed. I smiled to myself, the kind of quiet smile that blooms from somewhere deep inside. Then I typed back, "Thanks, Dad. That means more than you know." I put the phone down and let the silence fill the room. Not the heavy silence of disappointment, but the calm kind. The kind that comes after a storm has passed and the air smells like possibility. I leaned my head back, eyes closed. Then the phone buzzed again. A new number. I answered without thinking. "Hello, Lauren Taylor." A female voice, confident and warm. "Yes, speaking." "This is Ava Cortez, senior partner at Goldman Sachs. I won't take much of your time, but we're launching a new initiative for female tech founders under 30, and we'd like to invite you to be a mentor and strategic advisor." I blinked. "I'm honored." "We followed your journey closely," Ava said. "Your leadership, your humility, your decision to give back. It's the kind of example the next generation needs, not just in business, but in life." I wasn't sure what to say. "Would you be open to a short virtual meeting next week?" she asked. "We'd like to build the program around your insight." "Yes," I said. "Absolutely." After we hung up, I sat there stunned. Not because of the offer, but because I realized I was no longer chasing validation. I was shaping legacy. The girl who once sat on these very cushions, wondering if she'd ever make her parents proud, was now someone others wanted to emulate. And the beauty of it, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like purpose. I glanced around the apartment, the cracks in the wall, the old bookshelf stacked with dog-eared research papers, the little plant that somehow stayed alive through every storm. I wasn't ready to leave this place just yet. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to remember where I started, how far I'd come, and how much further I still intended to go. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one like stars remembering to show up. And for the first time in years, I felt no pressure to prove anything. I was more than a billionaire. I was myself. The night was still, and my apartment had gone completely quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic beyond the window. I stood barefoot by the glass, arms crossed loosely over my chest, looking out at the city I'd grown up beside, but never truly belonged to until now. The window was smudged the way it always was. I never cleaned it properly. A part of me liked the imperfections. Beyond it, the skyline stretched in its quiet brilliance. Lights blinked from office towers and student dorms. Somewhere out there, someone was pulling an all-nighter for a research deadline. Someone else was coding their first line of a startup idea. I had been both of those people once. I let my eyes blur and allowed myself to remember the early years, the rejections, the whispers behind my back in department lounges. She's too ambitious. She's not faculty material. Does she really think she can commercialize that? I remembered the gut punch of that first failed pitch. The whiteboard full of red ink from a senior advisor who thought my model was unrealistic. The look in my parents' eyes the night I said no to the Amazon job and yes to a path no one could see but me. I remembered feeling abandoned, not just financially, emotionally, like my choices made me invisible, but
From that abandonment, something remarkable had grown. A defiant resilience, a quiet fire that whispered, "Build anyway. Build because they don't believe. Build so that someday they will." And I had brick by invisible brick. I had built a company, then a movement, then a legacy, and eventually, almost accidentally, a bridge back to the people who once couldn't see me at all. It struck me then how life had followed a kind of impossible symmetry. First they turned away, then I turned inward. Now we'd turned toward each other. It hadn't come through lectures or shouting matches or guilt. It had come through truth, through vulnerability, through that rare courage it takes to admit we were wrong, not just to others, but to ourselves. I stepped back from the window, picked up my phone, and opened the saved message from Dad again. "Proud of you, always have been, just too damn stupid to say it." Tears threatened, but they didn't fall. They stayed right there in the corners, soft and warm, because I believed him now, and more importantly, I believed in myself with or without that message. I walked to the bookshelf, pulled down an old journal, and flipped through the pages. One entry from years ago caught my eye. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm chasing all of this just to prove I'm worth loving." I ran my fingers over the faded ink. And then I smiled, not because the pain wasn't real, but because I no longer lived in it. I closed the journal, returned it to its place, and turned towards the window once more. The sky was lightening subtly, beautifully. The first streaks of dawn touched the tops of the buildings, painting everything gold. A new day, a new chapter, a new version of me. I stood in that moment, still full, whole. I thought of my mother's hands wrapped around mine, of my father's voice cracking as he said the words I'd waited decades to hear, of the way it felt when our past didn't need to be erased, to be rewritten. And I whispered to the window, to the city, to the version of me who once thought she had to choose between success and belonging. I'm not just a billionaire, I'm their daughter, and now, finally, they see me. The sun slipped over the horizon, flooding the apartment with warm light. It touched every forgotten corner, every crack in the wall, every faded memory, and made them beautiful. I closed my eyes and let it